was a date when Hong Kong set in its measures. Not only did Hong Kong set in its measures on this date, Singapore closed its schools on the 27th of March 2003. So for the whole SARS epidemic, there was a start date for the social measures. As it spread to 26 countries and had over 8,000 confirmed cases, SARS did not qualify as a pandemic. Without the fast and successful containment efforts around the world against it, it might have developed into a pandemic. My choice to include it here is based on it being a potential pandemic. The original cases were discovered in Fushan, which is the odd 130 kilometers away from Hong Kong, but still in the Pearl River Delta, and therefore we can simply take the Pearl River Delta as the origin place, especially if we consider that Hong Kong became the hub for SARS spreading internationally. If we check the astrology for this date, we take the 11th harmonic for Hong Kong against the solar eclipse in Fushan and see a confirmation once again of the activation of the solar eclipse, according to our hypothesis, by the 11th harmonic transiting sun against the solar eclipse Neptune, a square in this case, and under an orb of 2 degrees. We are also using proportional orbs here. And now I want to add one last instance to the test group of attempting to limit the spread of disease at the origin of an outbreak by simply reading through the developments of Wuhan, which I could access through the internet at several different news sites. That was to discover if there was any tightened restrictions during the endurance of the lockdown in Wuhan. Just checking the history, I found that on the 11th of February, there was a tightening of the restrictions so that actual community blocks were locked down and regulations of how households were allowed to let members leave to arrange with supplies was tightened even more. If we check the astrology for this, we find that in the 11th harmonic, the transiting sun is square the 11th harmonic Neptune of the Boxer Day eclipse from 2019. And this fits with the model, a confirmation once again of the activation of the solar eclipse, according to our hypothesis, by the 11th harmonic transiting sun to Neptune of the solar eclipse in Wuhan. There was one more tightening of measures there. This occurred after an announcement that the measures were actually going to be loosened, and the announcement was revoked and the original measures were set in place again. This was already described in the first video. It occurred on the 24th of February. So now we have a total of 6 instances in the test group, 3 of which are social restrictions imposed at Wuhan and the origin of the SARS-CoV-2 pandemic. All of these 6 are correlated with the hypothesis of the transiting sun in the 11th harmonic, activating, in most cases, Neptune and Saturn, but also in a few cases, just activating Neptune. The one exception was the National Influenza Immunization Program of 1976, where additionally, because of its extreme format, the urgency with which it was conducted, despite the risks of vaccinating without having field tested the vaccine, I also looked for the possible transit of the Sun against the Saturn-Pluto midpoint or Pluto. So here there was actually a broader search. But with this, we have a sufficiently large test group to do a Barnard's test, which is a variant of the chi-square, to see if the test group differs from a random selection of astrological configurations according to the core of the model, only that was presented in part 2 of this series. Now, the reason that I'm just concerning myself with the core of the model is because all of the instances, except the National Influenza Immunization Program, were exclusively tested there. The whole model will only become testable when we have more instances of coordinate and crush strategies and some race through it strategies. Not surprisingly, as a delay and vaccinate strategy is the best of these, presumably, it's difficult to find the two extremes. Perhaps race through it strategy is even more difficult because it's additionally elusive. When does one decide not to take an elaborate strategy? That's the challenge of finding race through it strategies. The hypotheses were always formulated for the measures against initial or potential pandemic before choosing an occasion to regard. All of the eclipses chosen would be chosen before the first known case of the outbreak. This test group needs to be put in relation in an empirical testing against a group of random times for each instance in the test group. I constructed 3 random instances, and then I checked in the same way that I had checked previously. And these times, they were selected from half-hour increments, from the time of the eclipse until the end date of social measures in each respective place of origin. Now, entering the data into a 2x2 contingency table, the first column collects the randomized group. This is to be compared with the second column, which is the test group. As seen earlier, the test group tested against the central part of the model is rather overwhelming. We had 5 of 6 which fit the hypothesis. Only one did not fit into the central part of the model. Moving on to the control group, which is in the first column, we find that 3 of 18 cases fit the transit activation that was our hypothesis. This is an inverse distribution, so it should not come as a great surprise that the probability for these two groups to be the same is very small. In fact, it's far under 0.5%. Fundamentally, the test group is not random. And that shows us that the core of the model can very well be a working diagnostic tool, prognostic even. Now, several questions that arise due to this result will be dealt with in the final installment of this series. The results have been presented, and that wraps up another video to continue this series, and I hope you enjoyed.